I'm delighted to be here. Thank you to Impact for offering us this platform today. I'm joined today by Kenrick, who is he here? Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Yes, he's coming there. The Executive Director of NQAPIA. And yes, thank you for that. So Kendrick and I are going to be sort of providing the focus from an organizational basis as activists in the community. But really, one of the things that I want you folks to, the reason you folks are here is to hear our stories. And so we are joined by this like pretty amazing group of people who are going to be telling raw, unfiltered, powerful stories. And the reason they're sharing these stories is that we want to move the needle of allyship. We want to move the needle where all of you who are essentially movers and shakers from around the country who have gathered here today can really sort of do something to change the situation, to decrease the barriers that are present and prevalent in these people's lives and in all our lives. So first of all, it's an honor to, let's actually, let's just dwell on Pramila Jaipal for a minute. She was awesome. And there you go. And not just that, she's the mother of a trans kid, and I'm the mother of a trans kid. And when she speaks up and says that, it is a powerful, powerful moment to know that someone who's a community leader like that is a complete ally. She's, of course, done so many things legislatively, but it's a real honor to have her in the room, to have her be part of this event. So just to kind of like generally talk a little bit about the purpose of this session, the purpose is to generate allyship, as I said. We want to engage all of you to provide genuine support for the Desi LGBTQ community on the ground, wherever you are. And we want to do it at all levels: family, faith, community, policy. All of these are necessary to transform people's experiences. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we're going to start with the storytelling. And then we're going to take a little moment. Kenrick is really going to provide the policy perspective, what's happening around the country. All of you know that there is a huge amount of anti-LGBTQ bills and attacks on trans folks. That is certainly part of the picture and what you can get engaged in. And lastly, I'll cover the issues related to faith, family, community, the way that you can demonstrate your allyship in very concrete ways, whatever your capacity is. So I'm turning it over now to our storytellers. We have Rizwan Jagani, and then we have Mihira Saraswati, and Naveen Bangia. So all of them are going to be sharing their personal perspectives today.
Good morning, and as a proud Muslim, I'm also going to say Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. So my story is an interesting one because it involves two words that you don't often see together, and that's gay and Muslim. It's like pick one. That's what I've been told. So my origin story is I'm actually from Dallas, Texas. Anyone from Texas? Yes, Saba, my new friend. So I lived in Dallas for about 21 years, and I was born to a moderate Shia Muslim family, and I lived in a very conservative community in Plano, Texas. And you know, when you start having these sort of feelings and these sort of different perceptions as, you're growing up, you're wondering like, oh, this is just, something I'm feeling right now. I'll move on and I'll sort of cave into the norm of, hoping my mom finds me a girl from overseas. But then I realized it ended up being more than that. And the other interesting thing was, as I grew up, it was as though the world kind of already was clued in by my social cues, even though I had no clue what was going on. And as a result, more and more as I was realizing this is really who I am, the hardest battle took place. And it wasn't so much me against the world, it was me against myself. And that was the idea of reconciling my faith and my sexuality. Because when you grow up knowing that, oh, you're not allowed to be who you are, that is when things get tough. And it made me realize that, what was God trying to tell me? Was this my test? And back in 2019, a lot has happened. I came out to a religious speaker that I was close to, and that was what he sort of assured me. He was like, this is your test, just like to some people it's cancer. Let that marinate for a minute. And I have a lot of thoughts about that, and we can get coffee one day and talk about that. And as I was discovering more and more, there was two things I was realizing: the balance of culture and religion. And one might argue religion is law and culture influences. But religion is open enough for interpretation. That's why you have so many different ideologies based on one single core idea. But it's actually culture that is the sort of rigid law. And you can see that there was a very interesting interview by Dai Abdullah, who's a gay imam. And he said that when he lived in China or in Malaysia, that part of the world, he said that Islam took on a lot of characteristics of Buddhism because that was entwined in the culture, which later manifested in the religion. So we are all here as South Asians, and probably all different religious, spiritual backgrounds. But if you ask everybody in this room, your perception on family values, career values, social dynamics, we're all different faiths and different belief practices, but we will probably all give very similar answers. So that was another battle. Interestingly enough, because of culture and religion, people seem to cherry pick. And so I was being told by seemingly very religious people who might be infamous for something else, tell me, oh, the story of Lut, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And there's some very interesting TED Talks by Blair Imani and Junaid Jahangir that sort of dive into the interpretations of these stories. And when I finally had this realization, just literally end of last year, that if I believe in the same God as all these Muslims, who is the beneficent, the merciful, and is regarded as a perfect creator, then who I am was not meant to be an accident. And I finally accepted who I was. And so I remember when I was praying one day, I started praying again because I was coming back into my faith. I was about to go on this really important spiritual trip to Najaf and Karbala, Iraq, as part of being a Shia Muslim. And I remember saying to God, I was like, okay, you're the all-knowing, so you know what's in store for me, but you better start blessing me. About 2 weeks later, I actually met my boyfriend, who will be here tonight. So as far as things have been going, I'm currently dealing things with my family, and that'll take its time because you're having to deal with, again, years and years of what people believe to be law in terms of Islamic practice. But as a Muslim who, like everyone, works hard to pray 5 times a day and does all these other things, I feel like, alhamdulillah, I'm thriving. And I would just want to share a few resources as well that have helped me along the way. And there's a few Instagram pages called Muslims for Progressive Values, the Queer Shia Collective, the Queer Muslim Project. I actually did a write-up for that, and that's actually how I met Saba from Dallas. There's Hidayah LGBTQ, which is based out in London. And recently, there's a new group called the Queer Muslim Solidarity Network. And this group was formed as a response to about 150 North American Muslim scholars kind of banding together right at the end of May about their stance on the LGBT community. And if you read the article, it's pretty easy to find. I don't have the name, but it's pretty easy to find the stance of Muslims on LGBTQ. It reads very much like Ron DeSantis's "Don't Say Gay" bill. And it even quotes to say that we will side with political figures who support our beliefs. I don't know about you, but there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of, what our faith teaches us about kindness and compassion, and then you put out a statement like this. So the challenge I put to all of you in this room today, and whether it's being an ally or if one of you is going through this journey, is be so sure of your spiritual conviction that and it doesn't even have to be 100%, but get to maybe 60, 70%. That way you yourself have enough armor in the world to be your true self. And as an ally, the other most important thing is amplifying stories. And it's not just the public figure who's been out for years and is verified on Facebook or Instagram. It's not the celebrity who may come out tomorrow and my Instagram will be flooded with their coming out story. No, it's your best friend, it's your work colleague, it's someone that you respect in your community who may have taken that step to share their story. First of all, you need to write to them, call them, and let them know I am there for you, and you have a friend in me that you can talk to. because when you talk to the same people over and over, you get scared that you're going to drive them crazy, but you want to let them know that they have a network and they have a squad. And share their story, amplify their story, because when I finally shared my story, I had moms reach out to me saying that I hope I can create a space for my children to be their authentic selves. So help that narrative perpetuate, that authenticity is really the true form that the world embraces you, and that was something else I was told. So that's something I just want to put out there. You know, be the loudspeaker on behalf of your friends that are finally showing bravery, and be that one unapologetically, which means if the religious person's coming after you, you know what to say and you know how to also defend them, because this does not make you popular necessarily, but the world will embrace authenticity. And that's why I even feel like I'm here today speaking in front of all of you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mihira. My pronouns are she, they.
Just want to make sure they can hear you.
Can y'all hear me okay? Yes. Okay. I'm super nervous. I'll start out with a little content warning. I'm going to talk about some really tough topics. I'm going to talk about sexual abuse. I'm going to talk about physical abuse, psychological abuse. I'm going to talk about addiction, self-harm, homophobia, transphobia. So at any point, if you need to check out, walk out, no worries. If you want to put on your earbuds and go to your happy space, please do so. And the summit organizers, AV crew, I had shared a slide. This would be the most opportune moment to display it. So if you can, yes, brilliant. I violated every data viz principle there, but it will give you something to focus on. So my journey starts in Oman, born to a Tamil father and a Telugu Parsi mother. In the immediate aftermath, I think of my birth, or even probably before that, I think their relationship devolves. They get a divorce. And in those days, if you were a woman, you just couldn't go and get a divorce and leave, right? You had to have your husband's approval. So the condition was my mother had to give up custody, and then my father was like, okay, I'll divorce you. While that was happening, he didn't actually have the ability to, he didn't have a place of his own. He was working in a hotel, night shifts, living in the hotel. So basically from 83, 84, moved from grandmother's place, staying with his friends, and just wondering what the hell is going on. And then finally in 84, there's a boarding school called Barnes. And when you're 4, that's when they start accepting students. And so my father packs me off to boarding school. And I'm not sure how this all happened, but my mother was the one dropping me off. And just to kind of give you a context of that time, even though it's 1984, it's like a Charles Dickens novel, like a big metal trunk with all my stuff in it. And it was it's a horse and a donkey, so it's a jackass-driven carriage. It's got 2 wheels and a buggy, and there's an opening window. So from the train station, get into this horse carriage, which it takes us to the boarding school and drops us off. And I was bawling in tears. The carriage is going off. My mother's looking out the back slit. I'm running after it, waiting for her to stop and come back and take me with her. But she just keeps going. And then I realized that was my first time of feeling alone. And the first time I recognized in myself that I was depressed. Ultimately, I was really homesick. I was in the sick quarters, and ultimately she came and took me back and started again living with her. My brother was there as well in Ahmedabad. And that brings us to 1985, 1986, 1987, and I'm not sure the exact year, but that was my first experience with sex. It was not by choice. One of our babysitters, forced himself onto me. And at that time, I didn't even know any better, because, I thought we were just playing. And casually, I happened to mention to my parents, oh yeah, by the way, we were playing with this bully and da 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 da. And my parents, it was a dead silence, and that was the last time we saw him. Memory is like pushed away deep into my brain. Didn't realize it till like I was in my 30s when I first and I knew the memory was there in my brain, but I never allowed myself to speak it until I went to therapy and I said it out loud. And funnily, 2016, I think my mommy visits DC. They're in Green Font somewhere. I was like, hey, whatever happened to Bahadur? And she's like, why are you asking about Bahadur? And I was like, well, we're talking about all these people from our past lives. So I was like, let me bring them up. But dead silence, never mentioned anything. And the point of that is, that's the culture. It's like shame you don't talk about it, right? Because even if you're the victim, it's your fault, right? And so those are the roots of kind of where all this homophobia, transphobia, all the shame around sex and our bodies comes from. So that was that. Comes to and also at this time, my mother, she's living in the apartment where her mother lived. Everybody in the community knew that she was married and divorced, and then she fell in love with somebody else and wanted to live with him, and this man comes and lives in the apartment. So there was a lot of tension in the house. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of shame because women who divorce, they're whores. Women who smoke cigarettes, they're whores. And so that's kind of that was just the general vibe. That's how life was. So it was a tense household. They were trying to figure their way out. And so it obviously made for a painful and uncomfortable experience as a child. And we were miserable. And so then by this time, my father has relocated, living in Denver. We moved there. In the first few years, it's really good, but it's also a period we start to forget about India and Indian life. He married a white woman from Iowa. On a superficial level, it was we were trying to play the Brady Bunch thing. But in reality, there was a bit of a cultural clash. She didn't understand our language. We didn't understand their language completely, even though we spoke English. She was deeply uncomfortable by it. And we also just wanted to forget, everything from the past and start fresh. And then slowly, after a few years, those cultural differences really start to manifest, and we really start to see the stark differences. And then 92 is those are that's the first time I really wished I was dead. And I used to be like, why am I alive? Why do I have to live like this? Why am I so miserable? I wish I could just not wake up. And that was also at the same time when I started smoking cigarettes. My first step towards being an addict. And during this time, I had kept a journal of kind of all my feelings. My stepmother finds it, she reads it, she freaks out, and unpacks a whole cauldron of abuse for a long time. And then finally, they were frustrated with me, and so they sent me back to India. By this time, I don't speak Hindi, I don't speak Gujarati. I speak English with an American accent, and it was tough. Nobody saw me there as an Indian, and even when my life in Denver, I was the Indian kid, right? So that's, yeah. And so adjusting, to basically a new city, relearning language, relearning customs, and all of those things were really kind of, and dealing with the abuse were just kind of a distraction because there was something even deeper underneath that, right? There was my sexuality and my gender identity, which was also driving me crazy. And so it was not until I get to high school in a boys hostel, I was male presenting then. That's when I had my first boy sex, and I was like, whew, a light bulb goes off. But immediately at the same time, I also knew that it was illegal. I also was very ashamed because even my partner was ashamed, and he's like, we can't tell anybody, and we got to sneak off, and there was always a tension, what if somebody finds out, what if somebody walks in the room, what would happen? And then also at the same time, it was very exhilarating. It was a big F you to society. Okay, thank you. And so, yeah, that was like my first sort of coming out, but also like in a very closed fashion. And then, fast forward to university, I have a girlfriend. I realized, oh, maybe I'm not gay, maybe I'm bi, I don't know what's going on. But all of this was kept inside, and finally it comes to head in '99 where I made my first attempt at killing myself. And then immediately after that, a few months later, again made another attempt just because I just did not want to be me. And so like that feeling of pretending to be somebody else, of constantly looking at the mirror and hating myself every single day for decades, for up until basically 2021 when I put on my first dress, put on some lipstick, and for the first time I saw myself in the mirror and I said, I love you, like genuinely. Not the kind like when somebody says, hey, you should look at yourself and be kind to yourself, but like the real deal. Like the real deal. I saw the truth. And, I guess I've kind of glossed over a lot of stuff. But in spite of all of those kind of dark moments, and the sort of ambivalence or the ignorance of my family, my community, my leaders, my teachers, there was countless individuals, random people who stepped up. They held me, they wiped away my tears, they told me it was going to be okay. Almost all of them random strangers, just coming out of the sky, going out of their way to take care of me. And like that's the only reason I exist here today, is because of random folks just stepping up. And so to kind of like wrap up, I would just, the question, that I want to ask, for the parents, the teachers, the community leaders, why do you create life if you're not willing to nourish it? Why do you only create life so that you can bend it to your will? Right? I mean, we talk about family values, community values, and so many queer kids have been left out, hang them out to dry, right? And not just like ignore them, but like proactively try to destroy them, right? You create life just to destroy it. And so why? Why do they do that, right? And so, yeah, that's my story. Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to say that we are going to be taking an additional 10 minutes. These are not easy stories to tell or to hear. And so what we're going to do is actually use the hour to cover what we intended to cover, and then maybe go an additional 10 minutes for you to do ask any questions that you have. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Naveen, and I'm a parent of, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm a parent to twins that were assigned female at birth. And my story is really them coming out as gay, both of them at separate times in high school. And that was okay. My wife and I were pretty comfortable with being gay. We knew people that were gay, had good friends, and we understood that. But I think after first year of college, one of our kids came out as non-binary. And it really opened our eyes to the millions of assumptions that we make every day as I'm a cis heteronormative male. And, things like find a good boy for your daughter and so on, and then one day and so on. All these things they're kind of jokes, but they're so embedded in our culture that to those folks that are non-binary or gay, it's really, when they're in that presence, it's really like a microaggression, and it makes them uncomfortable. And I want to talk a little bit about the word uncomfortable. So when I ask my kids, how do you feel in that situation, in situation X or Y with the grandparents or whatever, and they say, it's uncomfortable, Dad. And I say, I don't know what that means. So, I think our language is inadequate. We sterilize the words we use in the LGBTQ community to describe things because, as you heard so vividly, it's so emotional. So if you felt, that word uncomfortable, I still have a challenge with that. You know, there's a quote that the limits of my vocabulary are the limits of my experience, which means, and I'm a science person, so this is all hitting me really new right now, all this emotional stuff. And so it really dawned on me that we need a better language. We need the storytelling. We need the emotions behind it. And when I heard, so one of my kids said, okay, that they felt like they needed to occupy as little space as possible. Thanks. Sorry. So that hits home. Like when you hear that, can you imagine as a parent? So I think we need to, really have a better language. And I heard the same thing from a poem as part of our Desi Rainbow support group. This idea that to occupy as little space as possible. That's different than uncomfortable. Right? So, anyway, so our language, we really need to be more clear so that, as a cis majority, we can't understand what it's like. So it's myself included, really. It's this constant learning with my kids. So it's this constant learning of just, what it's like to be in their skin. And we need to have them at the table when it comes to policy making, right? And that's where, when Aruna told me who this audience was, and as Parmela said, I consider myself not political. But I think today is changing that. So my point is, as someone who loves, cares, supports about my LGBTQ children, I have to try and share this story. Because, their voice is not heard. And it's not their job. Like, my kids are both introverts, right? They would never be seen in a situation like this. My wife said, oh, let's go to the Pride Parade in Buffalo, where we're from, the other day. That kid was like, no, thank you. So their struggles are their own, and to ask them to be, advocating for themselves is, it's not fair to put that pressure on them. So I guess what I ask of the folks in this room is that, we can't be silent bystanders. And as I was thinking about this, what's the opposite of silent bystander? We all know the term silent bystander. I don't know the opposite of it. Is it stand up for someone? Is it stick up for them? Because we know about it from bullying, right? This is basically bullying any minority. And so let's not be silent bystanders and include folks in the LGBTQ community in policy making and in decisions, because we can't understand it. We have to accept that no one of us has the perspective or the right perspective for everybody. So really we need to bring everybody to the table. And, I told this to my child yesterday before I left, and they're like, oh, you're just realizing that now, Dad? I'm like, well, I usually don't think about policy that much, So to them it's obvious. Like, they've lived a life where they've never been part of the majority. They know that other people don't think like them. I grew up in a world in a cis majority where, most of us in the cis heteronormative think our view is the quote-unquote right view, and when we argue with each other, we're arguing to convince other people of our point of view. So we're so fixed, like, that this is the way to think, this is the way to live our life, this is the way to do whatever. And my kids have grown up in a world where they know everybody else thinks differently than them. So that's, it's kind of, all this is kind of eye-opening for me. And so, I hope that through the tears, and you hear that, this is, it's certainly quite emotional, but but be open to the idea that just like any other minority, the LGBTQ community needs a voice, needs to be heard, and it's not on them, right? It's on the silent majority to step up. So.
Thank you. And now we have Kenrick, the Executive Director of NQAPIA.
I'm going to set a timer. In some ways, I have an easier task. Usually, I have an easier task than the people who speak from their personal experience. It's not that I don't have a personal experience, but I get to look at this dispassionately. And there's value to that, but there's also safety to that. So I'm going to talk about policy today, and hopefully relate it to what we can do to improve the lives of people like everybody on this stage. I'm a firm believer that if we advance LGBTQ rights, particularly trans rights, intersex rights, non-binary rights, we will increase the rights of everybody. Right? That is the argument. Well, you'll time me, right? So I'll start with a kind of like a basic definition of what I consider to be policy, big P policy and small p policy. Because many of us have different ideas of policy. Even people like me that have a master's in policy can't really define it. So I'll use these definitions as I go through laying out what is happening on the legislative agenda, what I call the anti-equality legislative agenda that is really rolling across the country and rolling over pretty much all of us. So policy to me, big P policy, is data-driven intervention that shapes laws. It is what is informing our advocacy to change laws. Small p policy are the things that implement laws that have been passed, right? They are rules and agencies. They are what is allowable under Medicaid, for example, whether parents are being criminalized for loving their children, right? So do we understand those two terms? So I'm going to speak a lot about laws, right? And people always ask, well, policy is this bigger amorphous thing. Laws are basically a point in time. But I want you to understand how they inform each other. So what we are talking about is both advocating for policies to change certain laws and also the implementation of laws that are being passed and how dangerous they can be. So, and I'm going to say this as of yesterday, because there are anti-LGBTQ laws that are being introduced at a feverish clip across the country. We cannot even keep a handle on the numbers. If you look at different organizations, from GLSEN to ACLU to HRC, they're different numbers because it's people just tracking bills across the country. And these are just state-level laws. What is happening at the municipal level, what is happening at school board level, what is happening on the dog catcher level is even bigger. But it is happening. If there's somewhere in America right now, there is an anti-LGBTQ bill that is being introduced in any forum where a bill can be introduced. So I'm going to go by ACLU's tracker. According to ACLU, as of this month, there are 491 anti-LGBTQ bills that are in some way alive in state legislatures across the country, and a few that are alive in Congress. This has been a state and local level situation over the last 2 years. It'll become a federal issue in the next 2 years. Most of those bills focus on three things. Healthcare. So it is either laws that will prevent gender affirmative care from being covered by insurance. There are laws that prevent physicians, doctors, healthcare systems from providing care to trans kids. And then there are laws that criminalize everyone in the ecosystem that helps trans kids be who they are. So You've seen them in Texas, you've seen them in Louisiana, you've seen them everywhere. We've also seen them in New Jersey and California. There are 3 states and 1 territory remaining where an anti-LGBT law has not been introduced. It doesn't mean it'll pass. Many of these bills are not designed to pass. They're designed to perform. They're designed to animate conservatives and harm LGBT people. That is the crux of most of these bills. Education and sports. This is to prevent trans kids from participating in sports. This is also to erase trans identities in the school system. So either they're going to out trans kids in the school system, or they're going to prevent teachers from even acknowledging the transness of kids. As the Republican governor of Nebraska said, teachers should not be pronoun police, but that is what these bills are trying to make them become. And when you are the Republican governor of Nebraska, you are quite conservative. So if you have an issue with this. And the third part is First Amendment issues. This is the book bans. This is the book bans and the drag queen bans, which is like dangerous and hilarious at the same time, that these are policy issues, right? Why is this important? Because you can say 491 bills across 50 states and 5 territories, and people are passing bills every day to do the most crazy, innocuous things. It will never happen. One, they're increasing in number. This is an entire different moment. This is a level of anti-LGBTQ fever that I have not seen in working in 20 years in this field. Like, this is shocking to everybody that I've spoken to, that we are in this moment where this fight is being fought again. And it's not just about marriage, right? It will be about marriage. It is coming. It's concerning me. I'm gay married. But it is the entirety of LGBTQ people as an identity, as existing. When people are going to Target to threaten staffers over pride beads, we are in a different place than going to the Supreme Court. We're in a violent place. And this is why these forums are important. Because the number of bills are increasing, the number of bills being passed is increasing. Every tracker is showing that, right? They are focusing on a distinctly marginalized group. Trans folks, intersex folks, non-binary folks. They're trying to buy into the idea that the larger LGBTQ movement will abandon these people. And they are not 100% wrong. So everyone has to be on their game to understand that this is a dangerous step, but it's also a first step to erasing many, many groups of people from public life. And for those of you who are very concerned about anti-API hate, but are not concerned about anti-LGBTQ hate, they're coming from the same place. They're literally being sponsored by the same people. And they are from the same root of white supremacy, institutional racism, enslavement, xenophobia in this country. So if you think you can oppose one but tolerate the other, it will not happen. Now, this seems to be an LGBTQ issue, right? Even if the bills are passed, even if Congress passes one, the president will not sign it, it'll die. But sometimes things happen and things become national electoral strategy, right? This has happened before. Something pierces the bubble of national life. Conservatives are great at doing this. 2010, it was death panels. Have anybody in this room known anybody sentenced to death by a death panel by Obamacare? No, right? 2014, how many of y'all know somebody who contracted Ebola? No, but you had hundreds of commercials across the country about migrant caravans carrying Ebola that will kill half of America. And it worked, right? CRT, how many people can define CRT, right? Certainly not the people who talk about CRT. But it shifted elections in places like Virginia. And we know the entire pro-life movement came out of the failure of segregation, right? This is how these forces work. In the 1970s, when segregation fell, when the academies were abandoned and abolished in the South, the white academies, right, where they sent their children to prevent them from touching black people, they were looking for an issue, and they found Roe. When marriage equality was passed, they were looking for an issue, and they found transgender people. There's an entire New York Times article on how this has happened. It's basically taking a few things, throwing it against a wall, and seeing what sticks. And transgender people now stick. So my fear is that in 2024, this becomes the rallying cry of the right. Right? Transgender people, the LGBT movement are grooming your children. Transgender people are stealing their middle school medals. Nikki Haley said yesterday that trans people in schools are responsible for a suicide rate among cisgender girls. If she is floating that in the primary states, you can see where we're going with this, right? So this is why we need to fight this now. And I say this, we need to fight this now because we are on the back foot. We still believe that this can be defeated by science. These are people who believe that throwing rocks into rivers is responsible for climate change. They don't care. They don't care about the science. They don't care about the big P policy, right? When I said data-driven interventions, there's no data that backs any of these bills. None. None, absolutely none. I've read them. I've read them to a level that their sponsors have not read them. Because most of their sponsors have not read these bills. They will admit to you that they don't read bills. They introduce bills that some foundation, some think tank, some PAC has sent to their desk. But this is not a data-driven policy intervention, right? So we're not going to fight this through science. So how do we fight this? In rooms like this. Y'all are a self-selected group, right? Not everybody's going to be a social justice warrior. Not everyone should take on, well, some of us are, and some of us who stand up here. Am I doing okay, Pam? Okay. I define leadership in this way. It is doing the things for people that you may never know and you may never see to improve their lived experience. That to me is leadership. And every time I'm frustrated by this work, because sometimes it is very frustrating, right? Sometimes you see the contradictions, you see why aren't people caring more, you see Philadelphia has a under 25% turnout rate for elections. When I live in New York City, it's 22%. Why don't people care? And it's really frustrating. But ultimately, everything that I live, from my marriage to standing on this stage to being allowed into a room like this, was accomplished by people who probably never envisioned me and probably never intended me, right? The folks who first fought for marriage equality probably did not know the term gay marriage, right? But they did it, and they fought harder, and they fought against things that are a lot more atrocious than what we are fighting against. So this is not about every single Desi in America joining a campaign. It'd be great. It would be fantastic. But this is about a self-selecting group to go back and be a bridge, right? So these are the action items. Fighting disinformation, engaging in these conversations, right? Intervening when you're hearing the nonsense, right? Like, trans kids are not responsible for cisgender girls' suicide. There is a crisis of depression and loneliness among young people in this country. There's an absolute devastating crisis around mental health and young people, including trans kids, not because of trans kids. So we need to make that distinction because we're going to hear it. And if we hear it from Nikki Haley, we're going to hear it from Nikki Haley is considered relatively moderate and sensible, right? So, right? I mean, She's not calling for, people to be shot in public. But we may have a president that calls for people to be shot in public. So we need to intervene in these conversations in the spaces where you are trusted allies, you are trusted leaders. You need to push back, right? Because ultimately, the most vulnerable people, the people who love them, the people who educate them, the people who provide medical care, don't have the time to do this. And they probably don't have the capacity to do this. The second thing is civic engagement. This is not voting alone. The majority of APIs in this country are immigrants, right? The significant minority among APIs are non-voting. They're ineligible to vote because of immigration status, because of refugee status, because they're undocumented. So civic engagement is a lot more than getting people out to vote. It is getting people interested in what's happening in their communities. Because oftentimes the people who cannot vote are most impacted by laws. So when you hear about GOTV and you know people who, maybe you're a voter, if you are a non-voter, if you are ineligible to vote, there's a lot of things that you can also do. You can be an advocate, you can do phone banks, you could help to register people, you can support candidates. There's very little, except for actually casting a ballot, there are tons of things that you can do to change laws and to change the people who are elected to make laws. And I will die on this hill because many people in my progressive movement diminish the importance of elections. I will die on this hill. The most effective way to change laws is to change the people who make them. Yes. That is the most effective way of doing it. Also, focus on the small things, right? We had a congressperson, congressional elections are important, presidential elections are important. If y'all live in Virginia or North Carolina, there's nothing on your TV that's not going to be like, somebody asking you for your vote on the presidential or congressional or state level. But local elections are really, really important. Vote in them, run in them, support candidates, ask your candidate. There was an entire crush out there for Jayapal. But your local state senate candidate, they will come in and have coffee with you. I remember my sister lives in a swing district in New Jersey. The candidate came, knocked on her door. My nephew said, "Oh, she's out shopping." He's like, "I can wait." Right? He won an election, I believe, by 320 votes, including hers. And he lost it. This was a Democrat in a swing district. Lost it to Tom Kaine Jr. But these things matter because they're not going to break through Congress, not with a Democratic Senate, not with a Democratic president. They will come close. They will pass bills. It is still significant that the first anti-trans in sports bill passed on the floor of the House. That was a monumental moment because it enshrined that at least in one branch of the federal government, trans people should not exist. That's a watershed moment, right? It took Congress, 50 years after the Civil War to say lynching is wrong? So imagine when these things happen, how hard it is to reverse them, right? And think of, we are going to lose the Senate, Democrats will lose the Senate in 2024. Imagine what happens if there's a anti-equality House, an anti-equality Senate, and an anti-equality president. Those laws will not die in one side of Congress. They will become national policy. So it is important to vote in those elections, but it's also important to engage in the local elections. And I'll say this about local elections. 3 states, 2 of them with Democratic governors, 1 of them with a Republican governor, had case studies where anti-trans laws were passed over the veto objection of the governor. Why? Supermajorities. Supermajorities in the legislature in Nebraska, North Carolina, Louisiana. Louisiana and North Carolina have Democratic governors who have stood firm that they will not, Kentucky as well, sign into law egregious anti-LGBTQ bills. Here's the situation in Louisiana and North Carolina. For a while, we held the line in those states. because they were one seat away. They were one seat short of a supermajority. Then a Democrat in each of those states switched, and they were able to pass those laws. And they passed it within weeks. This is why it's so important that that local person, that local office is filled by people who understand our stories and understand that we need to exist. And we just don't need to exist, we need to thrive and we need to survive. And we need to be on these stages. So the final thing I will say in terms of advocacy is that these are hard things, right? It's easy for me to stand up here and say, go do these 5 different things. They're really hard to do, particularly in the spaces that we live in. I always think of like my family, right? Like how do I motivate them? How do I shift them? How do I even explain what pronouns are, right? These are hard conversations, but if not us, then who? Right? This is a moment that we're in. So if it's not about LGBTQ rights alone, think of all the other things that you cherish, because it will not stop with LGBT people. It may start, but it will not stop. When these people say they want to take back their country, they want to take it back from all of us. And as far as I'm concerned, this is my country. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kenrick, for that rousing call to action. And I hope each one of you has been taking notes and you go back home and you do exactly what he said. It is a frightening situation. It's a really frightening situation on the ground for those of us who care deeply, because this is deeply personal. I'm going to switch hats a little bit. We barely have 5 minutes left, but I'll just take the remaining 5 minutes to talk more about the way that we can engage, even if we are not politically active, even if we are not really well informed with policy, even if we are not necessarily like the people who know exactly what to do to change legislation. So one of my biggest regrets in my life is that when my kid came out back in 2015, 9 years ago, my reaction was primarily grief and fear. Fear that my child is now going to be marginalized, my child will face hatred, my child will face discrimination, and grief at the loss of the life that I thought that my kid would have. So he's a queer trans child, and he's now 26 years old, and I'm glad to have been proven wrong. He is thriving, and he's doing what he needs to do to live an authentic life. But my reaction was the one that should have laid the foundation for him to take off on this journey. And instead, too many parents, too many family members, too many aunties and uncles, too many faith leaders, obviously too many politicians, all take this tack of the fear, the grief, and of course the outright discrimination. And so really the work of Desi Rainbow, which I founded out of my own experience as the Indian American mother of a kid who came out as queer and trans early on in life, and facing my own ignorance, my own lack of awareness, and my inability to understand how I should be supporting my kid, really has kind of led me to this place where we need to work in every single setting. We distributed we actually had planned to do breakout sessions, but we ran out of time because of the 1 hour thing. So we distributed a bunch of case studies. And I think these are really relatable to each and every one of you. And I'll start with the WhatsApp groups. So raise a hand if you're not part of a WhatsApp group, right? So this is the Desi thing. And all families, all extended families have their WhatsApp groups, ranging from India, Pakistan, wherever you are, and to all the way to Texas, So this is multi-generational groups. I frequently encounter transphobic, homophobic jokes. They're essentially termed jokes, right? Because this is funny. It's like, haha, isn't this funny? So what is your responsibility? Do you ignore it, saying that uncle doesn't know what the hell he's talking about? So essentially, here's your chance to stand up in a very small context, which has a powerful impact as an ally. So that's one piece. We have community. My kid went, like every other kid, probably Indian American kid growing up, went to a bunch of music classes, Hindi lessons, this, that. We try to ensure that our kid has 1 foot in whatever culture we're rooted in. What if like a child is essentially showing very visibly that they are not straight and cisgender? I mean, nobody's coming out at that age that very easily. But what if a kid is? What is your responsibility as an adult in the room? I put in the case of the dance instructor, right, who sees something happening. What do you do as an ally in this context? So this is another place for you to intervene. What about faith communities? The issue of gay marriage is very much on our minds as we watch what's happening with the Indian Supreme Court. And as Kenrick mentioned, gay marriage is a hard-fought right in this country, not necessarily something that we are not going to revisit in the past, but it has been at least legislated at this point. What is our reaction in faith communities, which are not necessarily, don't have to support queer couples? How do we deal with the kind of, the homophobia which says, let's not talk about it, let's just send them to a secular space and let them do their thing? So what is our responsibility as people who are members of these faith communities? What about workplaces? What about workplaces where people are transitioning and you think, okay, that person is not my friend, I don't really need to intervene in any fashion, but you hear the jokes, you hear what's said, or you hear like what's implicit and not said. So what is your responsibility in that situation as an ally? And of course, Kenrick really sort of got into the nitty-gritty of what is happening in policy. And the case study I put here, as he mentioned, is something that is actually real. So the United States Congress has said that essentially has tried to pass this law which says trans girls are not allowed to participate in sports. I mean, they're attacking children and children's ability to be part of their community, their schools, just for children to live their lives just the way that they need to. So what is our responsibility? And the silent majority, as Naveen mentioned, that's who we need to engage here. Not all of you here identify as queer and trans, but each and every one of you have a responsibility to the queer and trans community to stand up. And as Congresswoman Jayapal said, it's like, who's going to be left for you if you don't stand up, right? So this is our moment. I'm really thrilled that Impact has given us this opportunity to be here today, to sort of be here during Pride Month and talk as parents of LGBTQ kids, as trans and queer people, and really bring this message to you. But now it's your responsibility to carry this message back to where you're going to and make a difference on the ground. So I want to thank you for your patience, for listening, for all the nods and the smiles and the tears that we've been greeted with. And I did want to open it up. We have very little time, but I did want to open it up for maybe like if you're going to cut in for about 10 minutes before lunch, for you folks to ask questions to any of the folks here. Yes.
I don't. I visit Philadelphia. I live in Newark, New Jersey.
I live in Philadelphia, and I want to involve anything that we have in Philadelphia.
No, absolutely. We're actually doing a lot more work in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So, and there's a great contact in will be the incoming mayor's office on both API and LGBT issues. So we should definitely connect.
I also did actually want to say there's a sign-up sheet on that table that maybe we could pass around for those of you who want to be connected in any fashion with both NQAPIA and with Desi Rainbow. And I also wanted to kind of like say I have a moment of like swag options here. We have PRS PR bracelets for those of you who want to declare your support for LGBTQ folks. We have Desi Rainbow Parent Ally buttons. So please feel free to pick up those at the table later on. I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
Educating us, for all of you for being open-minded enough to sit and listen and understand experiences that we may know nothing about. I was born and raised here in the U.S. I've been here since the 60s. I am so tired of Desi's continually advocating for the typical issues. We need to stand up. We need to be in places we're not expected. That is the only way. That is the only way we truly show, we truly have solidarity with everyone. So
you. You have a question there?
First of all, thank you all for your vulnerability. I echo exactly what you just stated. Can't say enough what it means. I'm so proud of you, Mihira. My question is, what can we do, or what are some signs? Because the thing that echoed for me the most was the state that an individual is in. They internalize things and they're not able to communicate. What can we do? What are some signs for us that we should look for so that we can make sure that they know that they have that tribe or that network that you mentioned earlier? What can we look for?
Are you talking about supporting LGBTQ
Yes,
folks?
absolutely.
There is, which state are you in?
I'm here in DC.
Okay. There are, I just actually wanted to give a big shout out to Kush DC, who's in the house today. Radhika is there. So there are LGBTQ organizations like Kush, which is a South Asian organization that provides support in education and advocacy. These are the organizations that you need to support because they offer refuge for LGBTQ folks who are looking for that kind of support. Plus, they also are allied with multiple other national organizations that do the work of legislation and policy. So please do speak to Radhika, who's sitting right there, to see how you can get involved.
Thank you.
I have a question about the red states that are passing all these anti-trans bills. What are we as a community doing for people who are trying to escape them? Are we setting up housing? Are we setting up, for people that are moving to blue states? What should we do?
So are you saying what are we doing for families who are forced to flee red states? Well, first of all, I think we should be changing the situation on the ground so people don't have to flee their state. Yes. So I think Kenrick can really respond to that a little bit.
So in the wake, particularly of Texas's criminalization of parents and doctors of trans kids, there's been an uptick in organizing mutual aid, for example, that helps families relocate. There are also legal defense funds. But ultimately, as Aruna said, families should not have to flee hate. And it's easy sometimes to stay and fight, but they should not be told to stay and fight. We should be told to stay and fight. So the way we do that is we try to reverse these laws, right? Even in the reddest of states, there are still reasonable legislators who say this is going too far because it'll backfire. So, for example, Nebraska, right? Red as can be, but they were one seat short of a supermajority. So even places like Texas, we need to make sure that we're limiting the number of crazy-ass people who are getting elected. And that happens on a very local level because Texas is a very low turnout state. So if you can go back, and it's actually a disproportionately API state. So if we can organize people on the local level, and if we can raise our voter turnout, we can shift those legislatures, particularly in the southern tier, that stretches from Arizona to Virginia.
Thank you, Kenrick. I'm sorry, I just wanted to take one question. I think this will have to be our last question, unfortunately, because they did tell us to wrap it up. Yeah.
I lead a sexual and reproductive health and rights organization in DC, and we know that so much of the South Asian identity is very much also rooted in the faith communities. I'm curious what efforts are underway to engage with faith leaders. Certainly our parents and grandparents find validation through faith leaders. Is it that we're canceling the faith community, or are those who are coming forward to be that added voice that we need at the table for our culture and our community?
Yeah, no, those efforts are certainly underway. So we conducted a set of focus groups for faith leaders, queer affirming faith leaders, a while ago, to figure out what the issues are that we really need to address in the major faiths. You've got Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Jainism. And so we really wanted to figure out what are the people who are either queer identified themselves or who are allies in these communities who are faith leaders think the way that we should engage in. And really, what we're trying to do, we've done one thing which is kind of like a stopgap measure, which is create virtual and in-person faith gatherings that are queer-centered. For instance, we run a queer Garba, which we ran last year, and we're going to run again this year. We've done queer Eid, we've done queer Buddha Jayanti. That's one way to kind of address it, in the sense you create in a different space. But really what we need to do is engage with the institutions and offer them some level of like support and training. So the thing is, obviously you're dealing with knee-jerk homophobia, knee-jerk transphobia when you're in these situations, in these institutions. But really what we feel is, if we go in as members of that faith community and we offer training and education that says these people, essentially LGBTQ folks and their families, are part already of your community, and this is how you need to support them. So we're engaged in that matter of building a curriculum, and hopefully, keep fingers crossed, we will be able to launch it soon. Thank you so much for your support and for being here today. Please do talk to Radhika from Kush TC if you're interested in local DC organizing right here, and sign up for a sign-up sheet if you'd like to. Thank you.